Welcome to Back from the Abyss. I'm Dr. Craig Heacock. We've had a few stories about bipolar disorder during our 5 seasons, but I think this is the first one to go deep into what it actually feels like to be manic. It can be very difficult for people to accurately recall manic episodes because they aren't stored like typical narrative memories, but rather they often feel like confusing and out of control reveries that seem to have happened to a different version of themselves. And then comes the guilt and the shame that often follows manic episodes as a result of the loss of normal social inhibition, the lack of fear, and the surging dopamine levels, thus leading people to take risks and do things they would never normally do, typically within the 3 big S's: spending, speeding, and sex. I've been wanting to find someone who had the eloquence, the psychological mindedness, and vulnerability to tell their mania story. And as I've mentioned before, some prior episodes, this can be a really hard ask, and I needed to find just the right person. And then, fortuitously, I recently was listening to a podcast called Together S.O.B.E.R, hosted by Louise Barnett, and she spent an entire episode sharing her thoughts and insights on living with mania. I knew then that she would be the perfect person to tell her story on Back from the Abyss, and indeed this episode was a total delight to record with her.
It's interesting because, I was asked here today to reflect and talk about my experience bipolar 1 with mania. Part of that reflection, takes me back to when this all began. For me, mania was not my first experience of bipolar. For me, I lived a relatively normal life, and when I started high school, I was in my 2nd year of high school, and what felt like almost overnight. So I went from feeling completely normal, having a normal social life, having a, 15-year-old boyfriend that, we were quote unquote in love, all the things, all my social activities and theater activities all felt normal. I remember writing a paper in English class, and somehow that had me do some reflection into my past and it was actually about birth order. And I started diving into what that meant to be a middle child. And what felt like almost overnight, I fell into a darkness that I had never experienced before, and to be completely honest, have only ever experienced once since. And when I say darkness, I mean to the degree that I quite literally could not function at school, at home, in activities, and nothing else mattered. I could see nothing else. I could hear nothing else. My days consisted of skipping classes and crying in the corner of where all the kids used to hang out, and going home and crying and crying and crying and crying and crying. And that's what I remember. It took on a life of its own. Of course, I'm sure my parents had some awareness around it, but to me, it just felt like I was completely on this island, and nobody could see me and nobody could hear me, and I was never going to get out of it. I think in ways to somehow understand it or cope with it or get through with it, it led to behaviors like anorexia, like self-harm, suicidal ideation, a lot of embellished journal entries, and dramatizing it as well. I would say creating an identity out of it. As a 15, 16-year-old who is just trying to figure out who she is anyway, I kind of let it take on this life of its own. And that was who I was. And I found another girlfriend who was going through similar depressions. And I remember we became, self-harm buddies, and that just became who we are. I think probably the most just impactful about that whole time period, which lasted at least 6 months, if not a year, was just that this was it. There was nothing else beyond this. The present just being so big and unmanageable and alone. I did have intervention. My, mom did obviously get involved when they they found razors in my bedroom. And that was the thing that started my mental health care, my first kind of experience with mental health, which has been a very long road. I'm in my 40s now. Ultimately, I think that's what started me to get some understanding of the depressive state that I was in, get on SSRIs was the drug of choice at the time for me based on what we knew. And I was able to, for the rest of high school, for like junior and senior year, in and out of depressive states, but kind of
Yeah, that was my question.
normal.
Did you get back to healthy? Or after that first horrific episode of age 15, was that then the start of, as you said, in and out, but did you ever get back to a significant period of feeling well?
Not for a full year. My parents ended up sending me across the country to live with a family at the end of my sophomore year of high school. At the time, I think my parents, they probably would do things differently today. But at the time, that made the most sense to them. And unfortunately, in that trip, there were circumstances and events that led to more trauma and more upset and more depression. And finally, coming back that summer, it was asked of me to recreate my life. My parents didn't necessarily approve of the individuals that they placed blame on individuals that I was hanging out with in early days of high school and wanted me to kind of recreate myself.
Almost like this was contagion, like maybe you were with the wrong people, got the bad ideas, like the cutting ideas and the suicidal ideas. If they could just sort of cleave off these bad people, that you would be healthy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was when I got back junior year, I think that was my first, not mania, but it was my first kind of taste of what I call putting on my mask. And I reinvented myself. I changed my whole friend group. The senior basketball captain became my boyfriend. I started hanging out with the popular girls, on the lawn at school, dressing differently, makeup differently, started drinking, and just totally reinvented myself because part of it was asked of me to do that. And the choices I made were choices of rebellion. So I was like, all right, I'm going to reinvent myself and I'm going to do it with, even worse people or like, I'm going to show you.
You think I'm bad?
Yeah, I'll show you.
I'll show you bad.
It was a little bit of that. And it was pretty, it's funny because when I was reflecting on this didn't really occur to me in my reflection, but there was a strong piece of me that wanted to just like show the world, like, this is who I am. And so to answer your question, it was false health, false, healthy mental health, because that was the first time that I just started playing a part. And I've really done that my whole life since. It works until it doesn't, usually.
When was your first manic episode?
At the time, I had no awareness of it. But in reflection, when I went to college, first, so it was 2001. So I was 18. And I think a lot of it had to do with being free. A lot of my adolescence, all of my adolescence, I felt very just enclosed, captured, always fighting against kind of what my parents wanted to see from me. And when I got to college, it was like, I describe it as like the first time I put on my Superwoman cape. And I was set out to just like take over the world. And, part of this was, I had that captain of the basketball team left me for another woman, and I was heartbroken. And, I was just like, I'm going to reinvent myself again. But this was kind of on another level.
Because in hindsight, this was a reinvention being driven by like the methamphetamine kind of quality of emerging mania. Yeah.
It's like you talk about adolescent invincibility, which we all have as adolescents. And I think mania, for me at this time at age 18, it was like that pales in comparison, right? To just how I felt. Like I felt on top of the world. I felt like I could do anything, go anywhere. I had no limits. I could try anything without consequence, whether it's, sex, drugs. I probably slept an average of 3 to 4 hours a night my freshman year, sometimes drug-induced, sometimes not.
Were bad things happening to you?
I mean, yes and no. I think what's really challenging about my experience and why it took me until age 30 to have some awareness around it is because for all of the quote-unquote crazy, rebellious, activities that maybe I was taking part in, I was an A+ student. I graduated cum laude. I was, top of my class, and so it's like really hard to say.
Like, how could you be sick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's fine. She's just making really bad decisions. But I mean, she's doing all right. She's getting through. She's getting by. And
so people weren't expressing concern to you?
No. I think partially because of the environment of college, when everybody to some extent is dabbling in some kind of alcohol, drugs, some type of experimentation. Perhaps we just don't realize the extent to which, the other person is or is not doing that.
Right. You could have just seemed exceptionally fun, exceptionally vivacious, exceptionally sexual, risk-taking, but again, crushing it academically. So how bad could things be?
She's the fun one, right? We'll go to Louise's room if, we're going to have fun. She's always up to go out. She's always up to take a spontaneous trip. She's got a car. Let's, drive to California this weekend. I mean, whatever it is.
I mean, do you remember ever having glimmers of being worried about yourself in college, like during this extended first manic episode, that is something wrong or is, has something changed in me? Or was there ever any, hints of insight?
My life was perfect. My life was everything I wanted it to be. I was finally able to do what I wanted to do and on my own terms. If you look at the data, I was at the nurse's office every other week. I was sick every month with strep or, something, dehydrated at the nurse's station, constantly getting rehydrated. But
so your body was breaking down.
Body was physically breaking down. Yeah. But it didn't matter because of the way I felt. I felt invincible, and it was okay because I was still checking the boxes of life. And
again, as often happens in the early manic episodes or early stages of mania, it's mostly all good. You hadn't yet started to flip to the other side where your body was paying a big cost, but you hadn't yet reached the place where your kind of mind, brain, and psyche was starting to pay a huge toll.
No, not at all. And I didn't have, the only people holding me accountable were my peers, right? So this is also the first time that my parents haven't had a daily pulse check on me or even a monthly pulse check on me. So when you're in a long distance relationship, you can tell the other person what they want or need to hear. I think mania is also really lonely in a way. There's not a single friend that I've maintained from college. There's not a single friend even from that first year that I could call it a true, real, companion.
Because think of that, as amazing as you were, as amazing as you felt, as wonderfully as you were seemingly performing, arguably maybe the most important developmental task of that stage of your life, going away to college and making friends and connecting and building a network of people, that didn't happen for you.
No. I did feel lonely, but I used my tools, which were sex, drugs, and rock and roll, to bring me out of that and create false relationships
I guess there's such parallels, I think, with mania and substances. I'm just hearing you say that, and I could imagine if you had substituted my cocaine times or my meth times or whatever, my substance times, that I was so fun, I was so engaged, I was actually kicking butt at school, but I was so lonely, yet so joyous, so euphoric, so completely, utterly driven, yet so lonely.
And I think there's always a piece of it that's chasing. Everybody wants happiness. You don't have to be bipolar to want happiness, but like just chasing a false illusion of it and not really understanding what that is. But I think for me, when I talk about putting on my mask, like putting myself in different environments, in front of different people, in front of different cultures, to try to figure out, like, it's where I fit in. It's like that. I don't know what the nursery rhyme is, but like when you're trying to find your family. And because I remember, like, there was a period where I lived out in the woods in a tent and had pink dreadlocks. And then there was a period where I was like in the ceramic studio as like the art girl. And, it's just this like exhausting search for identity.
Trying on everything.
Yeah.
I could do this, I could do that. I could do this. Yeah. How did that start to morph then? So it sounds like your college years, you were largely in overdrive. And then you finished college, and then your early 20s. How did your mood episodes, your manic, your depressive symptoms, how did that start to evolve over time?
The first thing that I noticed in reflection that really stood out, that I never noticed before, is it took on a really like narcissistic quality to it. So in my early 20s, I still had that freedom. I was living my own first apartment. I was, working a job. So I still had those levels. I was still maintaining a high level of sex, drugs, and alcohol and socialization, so that stuff didn't change necessarily. But it was like, I felt like I was best in class. I felt like I knew everything about my industry. I felt like I had reached the highest level of success, and I was bartending at like a local restaurant. But it to me, it felt like I had achieved it all and I was the best. And I remember now I'm kind of back in the same home state as my parents. And so I would see them on weekends and things like that. And I remember just like this, I'm like sitting here at this table, like puffing out my chest because it was like everything I did was just, look at me, look at me, look at me. You can't tell me anything because I already know it. Or I'm going to tell you otherwise.
So you could imagine, outsiders, including your family, could think, well, is this the arrogance of youth? But, and again, in hindsight, it's looking like, no, this was the kind of hyper ego inflation of just sort of this low level, ongoing, manic self.
Yep. I felt beautiful. I felt so beautiful, which for me is something I struggle with. I had a few bouts of anorexia again in my 20s, kind of being reinforced by sexual attention, losing weight and, men being attracted to that.
And would the mania sort of interact with that such that you could get really kind of excited and energized about your anorexia? Like, this is my next project?
It was like... it's a whole nother conversation, eating disorders, but there was a competitive nature about it, a self-competitive nature.
And you are someone who's going to win.
Yeah.
Yeah. Louise is going to win. I'm betting on you.
And once you like crack the code to it, it's like you're just off to the races. And so I felt like I'm talking about 2007 specifically in my 20s, where I really, from an outside perspective, you're like, she's having an affair with a married man. She's a bartender. What is she doing? Working 80 hours a week. Like, none of that looks appealing. None of that looks desirable or like I'm working towards a solid future. But at the time, for me, I felt like I was doing everything and taking all those steps to get me to that ultimate, like, pinnacle place of achievement and success and happiness.
Mm-hmm. You know, we typically think of mania as being something that lasts days or weeks or maybe a couple months, but, you know, it's sounding like what happened with you was you had years of not like full-blown psychotic mania that ends people up in jail or worse, but, you know, you were like 88% of the way there, like in this like almost full burn, like, but not quite enough to get you, again, arrested or dead or, you know, quote unquote functioning. But again, I think of the parallels of substance use. Like, you could say the same thing back in those cocaine days or meth days. Like, I was working, I felt great, except that, yeah, I was working 80 hours a week. It's bartending. I was on top of the world. But yet, by other outside indicators, like, my life was not moving forward in a way that I might have expected.
No, my parents were desperately worried about me from a progression success standpoint. Like, what is she doing with her life?
But they had no idea what this was.
Not really. No. I mean, we had an understanding that I have depression, struggle with anxiety. That's definitely something that, you know, came out, and eating disorders.
Yeah. And were you in treatment, like, through college and then these first years after college? Again, when you are, mostly doing okay, but also like there are other signs that things are really falling apart.
Yeah. Kathy Kirschenbaum was my first therapist when I was 15 years old, and she's helped me tremendously on and off over the years. She's the only therapist that I've had until my 30s, when I had some major, major changes that we'll get to. But she was always that person. And I think deep down inside of me, there was always some awareness, because I would always go back to Kathy. You know, it could have been 2 years, 3 years, whatever it was, that I hadn't spoken to her, seen her, anything. And I would always go back to her. And in 2008, I had awareness around my eating disorder, and I had fallen into a depression. And I called Kathy. And Kathy got me in touch with an eating disorder program. So that was the first mental health program facility that I went to, but it of course wasn't addressing the root cause.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the self-harm, the suicidality, the eating disorder, the substance abuse, like, these were all, it turns out, symptoms of this core. But nobody in your 20s is saying,
no,
maybe you have bipolar disorder, or maybe you're having manic symptoms, or nobody's seeing that.
No.
Do you think that's because you hid it so well, and or because you were functioning, quote unquote, so well, or because, or you were maybe consciously or unconsciously avoiding people who might tell you something you didn't want to hear?
You never ask for help when you're manic.
True. It's true. You ask other people if they want help. I'll buy your drinks. Yeah. Get in my car. I don't know your name. Where do you want to go? No.
But no, seriously, I asked for help when I was in a depressive state. And if that's, I'm giving you 25% of the information by doing that.
Yeah.
So I truly believe that, and I hid stuff from Kathy, from age 15 to, 28 or whatever. Again, it's up to you as the individual to be honest and forthright and, with your mental health providers. And there were times when I was and times when I wasn't. So she's doing the best that she can with the tools and the resources and the information that she has.
Right.
And it was so inconsistent. I mean, I saw her consistently in high school. And then after that, it was call her when I need her kind of thing.
When did you start to have manic symptoms or manic episodes that were meaningfully, terribly causing significant problems. So not just, in college, we talked about the isolation, the lack of friendships, or, you just mentioned the lack of any kind of career progression and needing to burn the candle at both ends just to make it financially. But when did it start to become apparent, maybe if not to you, to at least some people around you, that something was really wrong?
30. Age 30.
12 years later.
Wow. And I mean, there's so many, I think what's so interesting about bipolar 1 or my experience of bipolar 1 is like there were 2 years when I accomplished an MBA under relatively good mental health. You know what I mean? Like there's definitely periods that you can tuck in here that, and I think that's why sometimes it is so hard to diagnose because, okay, maybe I was, a little bit out of sorts or a lot out of sorts at age 22, 23, but from 24 to, these are just random numbers, but from 24 to 26, look at her. She's getting an MBA. She's in a healthy relationship. She's, things are seemingly okay. It's a dangerous cycle when it's spread out like that because you don't have those consistent data points.
And, I've heard you talk on your podcast about mania and bipolar disorder as a superpower. Sounds like from 18 to 30-ish, there was a lot of superpower there.
Perceived superpower.
Yes.
I would say from 30 to 40 is when I honed in and created greatness, truly. But at the same time, I think what probably you're saying is when you do look back, I've accomplished a lot, even as a rambunctious 20-something-year-old. And again, I think that's why it's so hard for the individual to gain awareness and for the outsider to gain awareness. From my experience.
Yeah. When did you start making decisions that now, as you look back, you realize that these were starting to be increasingly terrible decisions because you really were not in your right mind. You were not healthy you.
Yeah. And 30. And I think it's because in my mind, I thought it was normal to do sex, drugs, and rock and roll to the extent that I was, because I was surrounding myself by people who were also doing the same. And so my perception was that is normal, that is healthy, that is okay. I chose to surround myself by those people. Age 30, things took a weird turn. I had been in a long-term relationship, probably not the best person for me, in retrospect, but it was all things considered, relatively healthy relationship. And we got married, and less than a year after being married, I was 30 and I met a 20-something, and the minute I met him, the minute I saw him, I fell in love, just head over heels. He is amazing. He is wonderful. I want to have your baby. In love. And within 2 weeks I was pregnant and had blown up this relationship, with somebody that I had a long history with. And in that moment, as upsetting as it was I think what's interesting too is you can be in mania and still feel negative and depressive emotions. It doesn't mean that you're not crying. I mean, part of mania is anger, but I remember such a dichotomy at that time because I was blissfully in love, now pregnant and we're going to live happily ever after. And at the same time, completely heartbroken because I've destroyed this relationship. My parents are no longer talking to me. Life has really blown up.
Lost your first husband and your parents.
And the family, I was living with family in Annapolis, Maryland, who cut me off as well at that time. So it was all of these relationships are real relationships, right? Not the fake ones that I've had my whole life. Real relationships in an instant have just disappeared. But in mania and that narcissism that comes with it and that denial, it was how could they? Don't they see? I'm doing the right thing. He was never the right person for me. it doesn't matter anyway because I'm in love and I'm having a baby and everything's going to be amazing and perfect. And, 20-something, you're going to take care of me. And it's like this false hope, maybe. And a constant, I feel like this is a recurring theme, like a constant. I think I've always been a futuristic thinker. I think that's just part of who I am as a human being. But it's like that constant quest to get that future perfect life, whatever it takes. And not having any awareness or understanding that, maybe we'll talk about shame and guilt, but it's like I look back at this and I'm like, how could I have done this? This is what awful people do.
Yeah, say more about that. How have you begun to sort of come to reckoning with the things that happened, again, starting at about age 30 and onward? I'm sure we'll hear more where actually you were getting to a point where you were really desperately hurting people.
Yeah, one thing that started happening at 30-ish is that just as regularly as I was going into mania, I was experiencing depression as well. And so it's like this. You get to the top of the mountain and everything is exactly where you want it to be. And then you take one step, crash, and you're all the way at the bottom. And you have no idea how you got to the top in the first place. And nobody's down there. Nobody was waiting for you. They left you when you were 3/4 to the top. So shame and loneliness is a really dangerous combination. And you gain some awareness that your behavior was erratic in depression.
Yet you're so embedded in this horrible, self-loathing, doubt, nihilism that it just makes all that 1,000 times worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I experienced that because just as fast as I fell in love with Mr. 20-something and got pregnant, I gained awareness and fell out of love and realized what I had done. And now I'm left as a future single mom, pregnant, alone, no family, no friends, nothing. And it's those times where I think we're incredible. And I think that our resilience shows how incredible we are as bipolar human beings. Because it was then that there was no choice. I had to do what it took. Regardless of any of the circumstances, I put myself in that situation and I had to do what I needed to do to make it better. And so in a long period of relatively stable mental health, being pregnant, and all the way until Annabelle was 8 months old, I experienced what it was to feel normal for the first time since I was 15 years old. I describe it as the ability to breathe. In mania, you can't breathe. You're going too fast. You can never catch your breath. And in depression, you can't breathe either. Mm-hmm. You're stifled. And from 2 months pregnant to an 8-month baby, I made real friends. I got a new good job, made amends with my parents, I should say. Enjoyed being a mom. Felt happiness, felt contentment for where I was in that moment, knowing that there was growth ahead, but truly just feeling okay.
Do you think that you had that period of doing well more because you were pregnant and you were finally, taking care of yourself, and/or there's this whole phenomenon, I can't believe if we've talked about it, but a lot of women with mood disorders during their pregnancy actually do well. It's the postpartum that's catastrophic, but interestingly, even women with really severe mood disorders often do very well in pregnancy. Do you have a sense of that? Why you had that kind of period of clarity and stability?
I've always wondered because, yeah, I mean, I wasn't medicated on anything throughout the pregnancy or even as a new mom. I think part of it is arguably I've lived a really selfish life up until having a baby. And that shift of needing to take care of that other human, and in my case, needing to do it completely alone. My parents live in Africa. Like, nobody was helping me. Part of that just wasn't a choice either, I think. But yeah, it's interesting. I have another family member that has some mental health, unresolved mental health, serious mental health issues, and she just had a baby. And ironically, this is a very close family member. Ironically, she just reconnected with us after 4 years. So I think there is something there.
Yeah. And it's probably something just very deeply, if you will, kind of biological, evolutionary, that when you have a baby, like, you need your tribe. Like, if you've cut yourself off from your tribe for whatever reason, it's probably a time to try to reconnect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you didn't have postpartum. That's amazing.
No.
It's so common with bipolar 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I felt really good. And I think that those two women, those friends that I made, that I ended up leaving. But those were like the two real friends that I feel like I've really ever made in adulthood. It just felt real and authentic. You know, I make a lot of, the mask is always on. And I think in that period, the mask was not on, the cape was not on. It was just me and my baby. And it lasted until it didn't. I guess for me, because I've always chased this happily ever after, for me, like, men is a common theme in my story, because in my mind, that's the solution to finding that happily ever after. And so probably the most escalated mania that I've lived through, where I've put myself in dangerous positions, my daughter in dangerous positions, is when Annabelle was 8 months old and I met somebody, fell instantly in love, and within 2 weeks drove me and Annabelle from the East Coast to Dallas, just completely on a whim, to live happily ever after with this individual. And thus the cycle continues of the, I'm doing everything right. This is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. This is going to be the key to my success. I don't need your help. I can do this all by myself. Mom and Dad, stop talking to me. I mean, like, it's like, I don't even know what to say. It's like, it just, everything just happens again and again.
Just back in it.
Yeah, just right back in it. But just with this euphoric, like, feeling that, like, this is it. Every time you're manic, you're like, this is the one. This is it. I finally found the golden coin, or whatever
like
it
the
is.
job, the idea, the project, the boyfriend, the workout routine, the business proposition,
everything.
Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, still high functioning, right? This whole time I've been a very active drinker. And I think, again, it's like I have not been able to have this self-awareness because I've been able to check the boxes. I was able to get the job that paid the bills, that did the you know, be high performing at work. And so it's like all those things just keep telling me on paper that it's okay. And when you live a decade or more, what is this? Yeah, a decade or more of these cycles, this is normal. Like, there is no, I'm discovering at 41 what normal is. And for those decades, just telling yourself and thinking to yourself that this is your reality. Like, this is what life is supposed to be. It's supposed to be dramatic. It's supposed to be up and down. This is just me. These were the cards I was dealt. Like, not once is it like I might have a mental health condition.
And so how does that then lead to you finally getting a bipolar diagnosis and starting getting treatment? What was the progression to that?
After a series of many, many events with this individual who ended up just being a very dangerous individual, I was able to finally fully get rid of that relationship and get out of that situation, and fell into a depression that I had not experienced since I was 15. But it hits different when you're in your 30s and have a baby and responsibilities and nobody there to like help, or you don't think anybody's there to help. And I didn't want to do it anymore. I had had enough. I had had enough of the ups and downs. I had had enough of seemingly getting my heart broken. I didn't want to do it. I hated her. I hated being a mom. I resented it. I regretted it, which are thoughts you never want to say out loud, by the way.
But I think it's so, no, I think it's so honest. And it's also so, it just shows like the power of the mind and psychiatric illness to take you to places that are just unimaginable. You know, it's like if you've never had the stomach flu and you try to describe that to somebody, you have to have the stomach flu before you really understand like what that is. And I think what you're describing, like when you're really in a delusional, and I would argue all severe depression is delusional. Like, yeah, I hate this kid. I shouldn't have been a mother. I regret having her. Like all these core things of you are just turned over on their head. And did you start getting suicidal then?
Yeah. Yeah. I would walk every day with the stroller, and I just vivid memories of a bridge that we would walk over every day. And there was one day that it just got a bit too real. And I called my mom and dad in Africa. I was also very, very grossly underweight. I had found myself in another cycle of anorexia, and I called for help. I had not been in touch with them, but I called them for help, and they came and flew over, and I admitted myself to Texas Presbyterian Mental Health Hospital. I knew I needed to do that because I had run out of solutions. Like there was nothing else I could do. And I wasn't going to make it, and she wasn't going to make it if I didn't go. And I guess that was my way of giving up, but it changed my life. I don't remember most of it, but I remember coming out of my room, I guess one morning day, I don't know, and speaking with a psychiatrist. And over the decades, I've seen a lot of just, one-offs, so I know the drill, like I know how it goes. And she listened to me. I mean, she asked all the questions, right? So I was used to that. I was prepared for that. But she listened to my answers in a way that I felt like I had never been listened to or heard before. And I don't remember it being a very long conversation. And I remember her just simply saying, I'd like to try you on a new medication if that's okay. And I must have said yes. And
do you think you were on meds then?
I must have been.
Something.
They must have sedated. I don't know. Yeah. My whole life I've been on and off of Zoloft. So God knows if I was on it or not at the time. Probably not. And took the cup, took the pill, went back to bed. And I remember this so vividly. And it's a decade later. I remember waking up the next morning and seeing the sun shine into my room, peeking behind the clouds. And I remember being able to breathe. And this was probably 24 hours after taking my first dose of lithium. And life has not been perfect since. I have certainly had manic episodes since and depressive episodes since. But lithium changed my life.
Yeah, how has it changed your life?
Like that. So much of what we talked about today, I've been retelling as memories, as stories. There was no awareness at the time. And first of all, having a diagnosis just on paper, bipolar 1, is sometimes the scariest, but for me was the most freeing thing in the world.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like you got this whole new lens. Like this doc, it's like you look at not only where you are right now, but look back at your last many years and just look with this lens and just see what you see. Mm-hmm. And you're right. I think what you're describing is all of a sudden everything made sense. Mm-hmm. A lot of awful things that you'd done and people you'd hurt, it made total sense in the context of the illness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't take away the guilt and the shame, and it doesn't take that away, but it allows you said it so perfectly, like to just look at it from a new perspective and to just say, wait a second, like there's more at play here than just bad Louise that can't get it together.
Choosing bad men, making bad decisions.
Yeah. Because that's who I had become. So from being medicated and now entering formal, regular, routine mental health care, I did start an intensive, outpatient therapy and things like that. And then I saw Shane like twice a week for years. So, finally, getting myself to a place where I'm getting constant care allowed me to start collecting data points. And things were far from perfect. I still, a big piece of my story is finding my sobriety, which I didn't find until 3 years ago. So, there were still 6 years of just kind of ups and downs and, still some radical behavior, but also starting to learn, first of all, like when that behavior is coming. Mm-hmm. Like, isn't that a novel idea? To know like when it's going to come, or start understanding the signs that are leading up to it so that you can be proactive about your mental health.
Yeah. Do you have a sense, Louise, you talked about getting more stable after lithium, but still you were drinking heavily and there were, it was relative, you're still unstable. Mm-hmm. Do you have a sense how much that continuing instability was alcohol? Because I'm wondering, number one, alcohol wrecks deep sleep and REM sleep. And we know that for all mood disorders, particularly bipolar 1, like sleep is critical. I mean, sleep is nature's mood stabilizer. So I'm imagining you maybe even diligently taking your lithium, but still drinking heavily. Yeah. So not getting, restorative sleep and thus continuing the chaotic cycles of bipolar.
Yeah. Yeah. And the drinking, it wasn't on a social level. I mean, it was progressing more and more. So the same things it's interesting, like the same things you need to be successful, like as a bipolar person, routine, schedule, sleep, healthy food, all of these things are all of the things that you don't get them when you're drinking. And there was still like, just because I'm on lithium doesn't mean I'm not bipolar. Like I am bipolar. I will always be bipolar.
One thing I thought was so interesting on your podcast, you had an episode where you talked about being bipolar versus having bipolar. And you are adamant that for you, it was really important to say, I am bipolar. And speak to that a little more, because I was really struck by that. I thought you had such an interesting explanation of why that is so important for you.
Yeah, and definitely it's important for me. And it might not be the right perspective for somebody else, but for me, Okay, if I have something, I have the flu, I have a headache, I have a bad mood, I have sadness, I have happiness. Those are all things that will change inevitably, and that you can change if you want to. So I do agree when we say things like, I am sad, that we should change that and say, I have sadness. Because you're not going to be sad forever.
I'm noticing sadness. Sadness has alighted within me.
Exactly. But as somebody that, having discovered a bipolar diagnosis, has allowed me to understand my identity, form my own identity, truly use my bipolar as a superhero, it is innately part of who I am. And if I don't acknowledge that, then I'm always going to be fighting something. I'm always going to be pushing something away. But if I can embrace it as truly part of my DNA, part of who I am, that's going to be the exact thing that allows me to use it to my best ability, because it has the ability to do that. And so for me, that's why. It's part of me. It makes me beautiful. It's why I'm having this conversation with you today, so other people can listen and know that, like, this is not something to hide. It is something to understand and learn about and figure out how you can, make it the best piece of you, because that's going to be different for you and that's going to be different for me. But yeah, I don't want to overcome it.
Mm-hmm. Another thing you talked about in your podcast I was really struck by was this idea that when you have bipolar 1, like the full-blown mania and delusional suicidal depression, you've experienced 0 to 10. 0 being the utter depths of depression, 10 being, although I would say you've experienced 11.
Touche.
And then you talked about how most people without a mood disorder kind of live 4 to 7. Like, yeah, sadness, frustration, grief, joy, but not the unimaginable kind of highs and lows of bipolar disorder. You went on to say a little bit more about sort of life on lithium. And that reminded me of something I hear a lot with my patients, in that there's this sense with lithium that there's a fear with lithium that it's going to blunt me, it's going to take away the happiness, it's going to take away the joy, it's going to take away kind of the superpower of me, it's going to dampen me, limit me. And I'm curious, and you spoke a little bit about that on your show. I wonder if you might say a little bit more about kind of your sense of this, 0 to 10 or 0 to 11 down to 4 to 7. What's been your experience pre and post lithium?
Yeah. And I think that's why, like, if we have bipolar, we're really cool because nobody else gets to experience this. So yeah, I equate 0 to 10, right? So 0 is obviously that depression that I described right before I went to Texas Presbyterian Hospital. Just, you're never going to get out of it. And now I probably feel my feelings, bigger than my husband does, right? So if I'm going to be sad about something, if I'm going to be angry about something, like, he's going to maintain some kind of an even keel, and I'm just going to feel it a little bit bigger. And from a mania standpoint, this is where I think I'm the luckiest girl in the world, because I still experience mania today. I'm almost 3 years sober, and I'm really starting to dial in and understand what that looks, feels like, how I'm behaving, all of these things. And what's super cool about it is, instead of driving 1,400 miles across the country on a whim with my baby, 11, I'm like creating content. I'm creating a podcast in a 48-hour time span that's helping people, overcome their sobriety. Or, I am coming up with really amazing ideas at work that we're starting to implement, on a global level. Or I am just enjoying life as a social person who maybe isn't at my baseline who I am anymore. But certainly when I'm manic, I'm like, yeah, let's go apple picking. Let's go, pumpkin picking. Let's go do all these fun things. And so that's where I say I don't think I had a superpower in my 20s. Like, I have it in my 40s because right now, like, when I look at the truly remarkable things that I've accomplished in the past 3 years, they've been in some kind of state of mania. And that doesn't make me crazy. And that doesn't mean I need to go see you for an extra session or like, you know what I mean? It just means that I'm aware of this and I'm able to produce at that higher level. And, you know,
it's almost like lithium's put like a regulator valve on it. Like you still, you know, even when I first met you, I thought, wow, you are a little person with like, you know, you're like a supernova, and, you know, and that's on, you know, a pretty big dose of lithium. And, you know, I haven't ever known you when you were back in your, you know, crippling, disabling mania, but I see that sitting, like you are infused with joy and excitement. And even when I first showed up here at the office to record this today, you had the hugest smile. You're like, I'm so excited. So
Energizer bunny.
Yeah. So it is interesting to see that it seems kind of like best case scenario, what we'd hope for, that treatment wouldn't have somehow like dialed you down or changed you so much that you would say, well, I'm not the person I want to be, or I know I am, but I have to be this way so I can be in the world.
Yeah, I'd like to think I'm on that track. I don't have a lot of confidence in myself because I have a pretty long track record, you know? Game changer for me was cleaning my body and mind and making sure that alcohol was no more. And ever since that transition, it's been, yes, the lithium, yes, the sobriety, but notably like the intense work to surround myself by my care team, DBT therapy, everything I read, everything I listen to. It is a full-time job staying mentally healthy. So it's not like I'm just waking up every day and being like, woo, let's just go live my life. Like, there really is intent put into every day. And some days suck. Just recently, because I have been collecting these data points, and I know I've said that like 100 times, but because I have been able to collect them, like I have the ability to see, okay, my body is feeling sluggish. I'm not sleeping the way I normally am. I'm not hungry. I'm not feeling excited by things that normally excite me. And same with mania, right? Like I'm able to see, okay, I'm getting little tinglings in my fingers and behind my eyes. I'm talking really, really fast. I'm coming up with a lot of ideas and I can't seem to catch up my own breath. And I know all of these tiny little, maybe seemingly insignificant symptoms if you just look at them one by one. But when you put them all together, it's enough for me to know, okay, Dr. H, like, let's go ketamine. Okay, Dr. H, like, I don't think we need to do anything, but I'm feeling pretty awesome right now.
If you have a skin disorder, skin disease, you could imagine that you could become very hypervigilant of your skin. If you have a pain disorder, some pain syndrome, you can become very hypervigilant of your pain. If you have a mood disorder, how could you not become very observant and vigilant of your moods? And because you said, like, your superpower, has, of late, has been your excitement, your productivity, your joy, your ideas, your creativity. And so, again, you just started to touch on that. Like, how do you know when this is superpower Louise versus like this is flipping into something, again, where we need to talk, or like something needs to happen? Again, I know you just got to that, but
No.
And it also goes the other way, where it's normal to feel sad or disenchanted or demoralized or grieving. And you've experienced such depths. I'm guessing it can be hard too when you feel badly, when you feel sad, when you feel like I just don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
It's almost, I can imagine like, oh no.
Yeah.
Like, isn't this the initial sparks of a plunge into something terrible?
That's what's tripping me up more lately, if I'm being honest. I feel like, because I do have a decade of medicated mania, that I do have a really good pulse on like the physical symptoms that I receive before even getting into mania, which tingling in the eye, my sleep starts diminishing a little bit, not a crazy amount. I start to just feel extra motivated, extra excited about even menial tasks. Like doing the dishes is awesome. And so I do have like a good pulse check on that. The depression side is a little bit trickier because for me, I don't know what is normal. Like I don't know what I'm supposed to feel yet. It's something I'm still really trying to figure out. Like, even right now, we're recording this December 2023. I'm not super motivated at work. I'm not super excited to like start my day. I'm really excited about this podcast. But like in general, like I feel like I'm just kind of meh, kind of numb. And it's like, I ask myself constantly, like, is that just normal? Is that... And then I get paranoid. Is that headed to a depression? So usually I'm just an over-communicator is my solution.
Yeah. And if we were sitting in a session together, what I would say, and again, this is something you and I talk about a lot, and I talk about my other folks with bipolar disorder, who have bipolar disorder, is that there's a whole bunch of contextual factors to think about too. So it's December right now. The light is low. We know that anybody with a bipolar, well, many, many people with a bipolar spectrum mood disorder, the vast majority really struggle November, December because of lack of blue light and a bunch of other factors. So, as you're saying, I'm not very motivated for work, again, which is hard for me to imagine because you are in general so excited. But if we were, having a session, I would say, that makes sense because it's December. Like this is a low energy, low motivation time on average for human beings, and people with mood disorders, particularly bipolar, this is often, even if you're not quote unquote depressed, or like this is a rough time. It's just that your bar is high, is very high for what you could or should feel like.
Yeah, I want that dopamine. I want that. Like I know. I don't want to say on a regular basis, but kind of like at least a few times a year, I know what it's like to get that constant hit of dopamine, like just all the time, every day. And just as we get adjusted to that in drug use, alcohol use, whatever it is, like that's our baseline. My baseline, everybody's different with bipolar. I tend to describe myself as somebody that functions at a 6 or 7 on a normal day.
Yeah. It's almost like in your, as you call it, your medicated mania, or your sober on lithium days, it's almost like you have, almost like diabetics have an insulin pump. It's almost like you have an Adderall pump, and it just drips a little bit of Adderall or just a teeny bit of methamphetamine into you, but not enough to meaningfully negatively affect your life, but enough to make you kick butt.
Yeah.
And that is this, this amazing power that we seem to, knock on wood, at least for now, like we have kind of tamed the beast. It's not gone, but right now it's like you have a 500 horsepower engine, and boy, it really has powered you to some heights.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a common fear of a lot of people, like what you said earlier, like, am I going to be a different person? Are you going to take all of that like amazingness away from me? Like, and the reality is, with all the right care team, tools in place, medication, healthy body, healthy mind, it can be harnessed in a way that is so super, super productive. And people will look up to you for it, and aspire to have that energy and motivation and,
Yeah. I think too, you're such a good example of, there's a whole range of what bipolar disorder looks like. And even within bipolar 1, there's a range, but there's a kind of subtype of bipolar 1 where people are mostly hypomanic manic. They don't really have that much depression. And, as I tell people I work with, that's both a blessing and a curse. And that in terms of completely destroying your life, mania tends to do that more in a more dramatic and rapid fashion than depression. But mania is much more treatable. You know, so many people with bipolar spectrum mood disorders are mostly in depression, and that's way harder to treat. So the irony is, it's like you have arguably the most severe kind of bipolar 1 in terms of like the big hot symptoms, the mania and the just completely out of control. But you also have the most treatable kind. And so, you know, so many people with bipolar disorder on 4, 5, 6, 7 meds, and you're basically on lithium.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some vitamins, but that's it.
Yeah. And if you are, and it seems weird to use this word fortunate, but if you're fortunate enough to have the type of bipolar 1 that mostly leans manic, especially the kind of euphoric mania that you had, I mean, lithium is typically gold standard home run. Yeah. Thank goodness for lithium.
I do. And when I said earlier, it changed my life. It changed my life. I feel so grateful. We've actually gone up doses over the decade. I'm at the highest dose I've been at. But I also know that a lot of mental health medications cause a lot of side effects and things like that. And for me, it just, I don't know, it's just always served me, if that makes sense. There's never been a moment where there's been a compromise or something I'm giving up because of it.
As we wrap up here, Louise, I wonder if we might just talk about, in general, like, what do you think people most don't understand about bipolar disorder or mania, or, you know, what you've been through? Because you have had an extraordinary life in terms of the vast range of stuff that you've experienced. And, you know, again, the kinds of experiences that most people will only read or hear about. But are there any things that you think that maybe listeners might not get about bipolar disorder or mania specifically?
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind. And obviously I'm speaking from my perspective and my story, but I think it took us as long as it did to find a diagnosis, because my mania wasn't for a couple of days or a week or two weeks. It was for months, like maybe arguably even a year at a time, you know? And so I think people just thought that's how you were. Yeah, that's how I was. And I also think there is nothing black and white in this world. And mania is right in that bucket, right? Like, so, you know, we can take out the DSM-5, or we can, you know, take out all the Google lists that we print of what it looks like to be manic, but there's always going to be a gray area. So I think, like how I said earlier, like I was manic, but I was also feeling feelings of depression as well. Like there's a dichotomy, even within the realm of mania or within the realm of depression. They often mix together. I think people think, right, you're either on the bipolar, you're on the manic side, or depressive side, but right, more often than not, you're both. You got dials of both. Yeah. And then I think one reason I'm so grateful to be having this conversation is because, you know, and my journey is far from over. In my mind, I'm like 3 years into figuring out who I am. So I'm kind of a toddler. But, you know, I feel like we only talk about people who are in stage 11 mania or stage 0 depression. And we don't give a lot of conversation or thought to individuals that are just kind of in the middle of it. Individuals that are medicated, operating a really, you know, average, successful, normal life. And I think having awareness around what, I don't want to say adult bipolar, but what medicated, managed bipolar looks like, and some of my biggest challenges as an adult in the workforce, raising a child, being married, seemingly successful life, right, is that we still struggle immensely with emotional regulation. You know, I'm probably going to be the first person to lose my temper in my house, maybe my daughter these days, but I'm going to be, you know, the first person to feel those depressive feelings big. And so just because we're medicated and just because we go to therapy, like, I guess my ask is just awareness, like just having awareness that life for me is different. Even if it's successful, even if I'm in love, even if I have a beautiful daughter, it's different. And it's a little bit more challenging, which makes me a badass. But
You are a badass. Yeah. And on that note, I just want to say, I've been really looking forward to this. And I thought, at the very least, this is going to be not just meaningful, but really fun. And this has been like 88% more fun than I thought it would be. So, yeah, you are the perfect person to talk about this. So I'm so grateful that, well, one, that you have your podcast and that I got to hear you talk about bipolar disorder. And so thank you for being open and vulnerable about that. And, lots of people are going to hear this. And I guess this has been really informative for me, and it felt like a gift. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
A final thought on this story. As I've discussed in past episodes, bipolar disorder is a big tent encompassing a vast range of clinical presentations. Patients with classic bipolar 1, those with periods of euphoric and eventually delusional mania, very commonly respond well to lithium. And like Louise, they also very often struggle with alcohol and other substances. I'm always very surprised when I meet someone with bipolar 1 disorder who hasn't long used substances for self-medication. Getting healthy and stable more often than not requires medication plus sobriety. As always, Chris and I love to hear your comments, your questions, and story ideas. You can reach us through my website, craigheacockmd.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks.